Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Content Warfare TV. I am not going to beat around with the introduction today. I want to get right to our guest, someone I am very happy to have on the show. And I actually had to cut off because she was giving me so much value in the green room. I was like, we need to be telling everyone about this stuff. So I am happy to have the founder and CEO of Social Boom, Kim Garst, with us today. How's it going, Kim?
Oh, it's exciting to be here. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, and as I said in the green when you first came on, I appreciate you coming back so soon. I know you had a travel issue for last week, and these things happen all the time. Anyone who's done Hangouts knows that, hey, it's live show, specific time, things come up, but normally it takes months and months to get back on someone's calendar, and I appreciate you making time for us again so quickly.
Well, it just so happened, last week my family and I went skiing, and we got hung up, or a flight, things happen and flights get messed up, and so I ended up missing it. But I had quite a few things to do today, and I'm like, let's just reschedule and get it done. And thank you. I appreciate your time, in making this happen on, just a few days before the holidays. So thank you.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of good stuff to talk about, and I want to kind of get right to the nuts and bolts. We're talking social selling today, and and so let's ask kind of the question that I get. I talked to you a little bit about who this audience is, so you're probably aware of some of maybe the cognitive biases that they have towards social media and selling in that space. Can you sell on social media? Is that something that businesses can actually do? Can you make direct sales? Is direct sales even the point in social media?
I think if you're on social media and you're not there to sell things, then why are you as a business owner on social media? Why do you put the time and effort into it? I mean, there is some back-end benefits to social media. You get brand awareness. You can attract your ideal client to you. There's lots of back-end value to it. It's all a part of the process. But if you're not actively leveraging your social presence to sell, then I personally think that you're probably not doing it right. So yes, I think you can absolutely sell on social media. I do it each and every day, and once you, and it's not you can't do another. Well, let me say I do that each and every day, but you can't make that what you lead with. You can't say bye, 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 and not give all the other pieces and parts that go with the social. The process of buying to your end consumer, and I think much of that starts with just value. Gary Vaynerchuk, I'm sure. Maybe many of those in the audience that are listening may know Gary V, but he has the the process of selling on social media, and it's the jab, 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 right hook. And that's the jabs are the value. What do you bring that's useful and value based to your audience, and then the right hook is asking for the sale.
Is it almost like, so I love the concept of, and I agree with you in that you're kind of always selling, but maybe you're not always selling something that people have to pay for, right? Like sometimes you're just selling your message, or sometimes you're just selling maybe another brand that you really believe in, or a partner, or someone that you're trying to support. It's kind of like if you're just there pushing stuff out for no real purpose, then that's when it feels like you can't sell. Is that kind of like a good way of boiling that down?
That is actually a really good. In other words, everybody talks about content being king, and content is definitely a huge, huge piece of it. But creating content for content's sake is worthless. Why even bother? Why put stuff out just for sake of saying you did it? Everything you do should have a back-end purpose to it, And sometimes the sale is giving something away. So, lots of times the giveaway is what drives a sale in the end. I do a lot of giveaways. I try to provide, great value through my blog. I do a lot of tips series. I do, free ebooks. And my free ebooks are the start of my funnel. So my sales funnel. So I'll say, here's a great value-based ebook, and at the end of that ebook is the lead-in to something that's low cost, and it continues to build. It continues to filter people through my sales funnel. But the initial piece that I gave was literally a giveaway. It was something for free that was just value-based to my ideal customer.
Yeah. You had a really good post actually very recently on your site, actually between the time we were supposed to be on and today, something about 10 tips for selling with your blog or something. That I'll have it linked up in the show notes. But in there, you mention very early on this idea of the funnel. And I think that's a concept that gets lost on a lot of kind of small size businesses, solopreneurs. They hear the term. I mean, I guess visually we can kind of see how it makes sense, but in terms of selling in the social space, like, just kind of break down the whole concept of a funnel for those who may not be aware, because I think this is really important kind of baseline knowledge for people before they can have any success.
Well, it's a core marketing technique, but you're right. There are so many people who don't understand the process and they get intimidated by it, and it's not that difficult to break, but it is a breakdown of it, break down the pieces of it so that you can actually implement it. So let me try to make it as simple as I can so that everybody can understand it. At the core of it, the way I run my funnel is something free. And it has to be value-based, because the end goal is to get people to trade their email address for whatever value proposition that you're presenting to them. In my case, I usually do an ebook that holds, I would like to think, great value to someone, and in order to get it, they give me their email address, and now I have an opportunity to market to them consistently. Now, whether they may present, that may be the only part of my funnel that they take advantage of. In other words, they may run with the free stuff, maybe it gave them value, and they may never move through the rest of the sales funnel, but I have their email address, and now I can market to them and continue to provide value and build a relationship with them, and they might buy something further down the road. Get them on your email list.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you a follow-up question to that is about the actual ebooks themselves, because this is something that I see, or at least I feel, is a mistake that people make with these types of, I guess you could say, not loss leader, because that diminishes the value of what you're actually giving away, but kind of these introductory free value in exchange for email address. I feel like a lot of people go way too broad initially. Right? They start out with some enormous ebook that doesn't really give anyone a specific why this ebook? There's so many ebooks. Does it make more sense to dial into one specific thing?
It is absolutely necessary, and I'm so glad you brought that up. That is a critical component of the whole sales funnel. So you take a very specific, very small nugget, very specific pain point. Something like, for example, everybody's complaining right now about Facebook's, cutting down on reach, right? So I did this ebook about, not how you can get free reach on Facebook without paying Facebook a penny. That was hugely popular, and is generating a lot of opt-ins for me. Now the next piece was something very low cost in other words, they got great value out the gate for me around something very specific, a very specific pain point, and I gave them a solution to that pain point in a free ebook. And it's not the entire solution, but it was a piece, and in this particular case, it gave them a lot of great ideas on how to get free reach on Facebook without paying Facebook a penny. And then the next piece is something low cost. It's the very first dollar that your prospective clients or customers are going to spend with you is the first dollar. It's very tough to get people to spend the first dollar with you. And once they've spent the first dollar with you and feel like they got great value for that dollar, then they're more likely to buy from you and be a repeat customer for you. So you have that first dollar they spend with you is probably going to have to be low cost and give them great value. So and it still needs to tie into that same theme. So from a sales funnel perspective, your initial free offer is very specific, and then the next piece of the funnel gives them a little bit more information around the same problem, And then, from there you take them into something that's higher. Maybe that first initial low cost item is, $9 to less than 20 is usually, my recommendation. And then your next piece is, probably anywhere from $50 to $100. And, again, it continues to solve that first problem, that first free offer problem. And then, maybe you give them an opportunity to work one-on-one with you and you're charging them more money. So it's a sales process, moving them from one thing to the next to continue to add more value and help them at a higher, different levels for, of course, in exchange for more income in your pocket.
Yeah. Now, if this was if Gary Vee was here, he would yell, "If you're not willing to ask for money, then what are you doing with a business online?" But I know so many people out there are saying to themselves, "How do I know that point where I ask?" Right? Like everyone gets nervous. It's easy to, I can get them on my email list, but then how do I know when to stop giving the free value for the paid value? Right? Like I know that's a struggle for people. Like they don't want to give away too much, so they don't do anything, or they don't want to. And then here's the power of a live show. Stuff's falling off my walls as we're talking to each other. Or they don't know when that moment is to say, okay, I've given you enough free value to help you, and now it's time to get that next step. Like I know that's kind of unique to each problem that you're trying to solve, but is there any type of high-level advice you can give to people to know when that point is?
Well, I would say that I 100% agree with Gary. I kind of alluded to that at the beginning. Why are you even on social and spending time on social if you're not there to create more income for your business? So the lack of a plan to create income using your social platforms is a problem for many people. So don't feel like you're lonely out there and that you don't, oh my goodness, I'm not making money from social media, because there's a lot of people who aren't. And most of it is at its root, as Ryan said, because they're afraid to ask for the sale. And I do so in a free to paid mode. Like I said, I take people into my funnel through using a free lever, and progress them through to higher and higher opportunities to create income for my business. But I use what I call an 80-20 model. In other words, I give a lot of free value at an 80% kind of ratio, and 20% of my marketing is my marketing message, whether that's giving people a free offer, or whether that's asking outright for the sale. But it's kind of an 80-20 spread. Most of it's I'm giving away. I'm giving value-based content, whether that's my blog content, whether that's a tip series, engaging with people around things they care about versus things that revolve around my product or service. It's just a big picture conglomerate of content, and then I weave in my marketing message at about a 20% ratio.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's, I guess all these ratios are kind of arbitrary, but I do think that's a good way to think about it. And I'll tell you from firsthand experience, people who've listened to this show for a while know, obviously I crowdfunded my own book, which is due out in February. But I had never asked for anything before that. I had never asked for a paid service in 4 years of creating content online, and I kind of saved up all that value, and then when it was time, and this is kind of, I'm saying this to take away some of the scary for people who are like, have been kind of, who haven't been able to ask for that sale, is that if you have been delivering value, people are willing to open up their wallet for you. And Kim, you've seen this over and over again in your business. You're so consistent that when it's time for you to say, hey, I got this new thing, or I'm doing this, and if you want to be a part of it, this is how people are willing to open up. It's asking for that sale doesn't have to be as scary as we think. And actually, you have a new book coming out, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I'm very excited to hear about this, but I want to talk a little bit about content mix, right? So I know you have some very large followings on a lot of different social networks, but two in particular I'd like to talk about. One that I like, and one I'm in that I don't do well on Facebook. So let's start with Facebook. You have this free resource and we can direct people to that, let them know where they can get at that. But tell us a little bit, give us the teaser on how people can get at some of this organic reach, which I find so hard to come by personally.
Well, this is one of my favorite subjects is content mix. You know, so many people, and I get this from across the board from any type of client I've ever had, whether it's a solopreneur to a Fortune 500 company. Fortune 500 companies, frankly, are more reluctant for the content mix. My idea of the content mix, because they're, you know, they are all about the business end of things and their marketing message, and, you know, we're a Fortune 500 company. But I personally think that content mix is incredibly important because people will not connect with you around your product or your service out the gate, usually. They're more about connecting with you on a personal level. So I leverage a content mix that I have found to work very successfully for myself and for most of my clients. And I'll just hit a couple of the broad categories of content mix when I say content mix so that people kind of get a feel for what I'm saying. You know, you have to meet people where they are. So when I said people don't necessarily connect with your product or your service, but they might, when you go to a social event, let me try to put some context into this. When you go to a social event and you meet somebody for the first time, you don't rush up to them and say, hey, I've got a sale on my website for 20% off. Here's the URL, right? You don't do that. And yet we plop down on social media and we think we can do that. What happens usually in a social setting is you find some common ground. I might meet you at an event and we start talking. Maybe we have kids in common. Maybe our kids play sports. Maybe we like football. Maybe we like hockey. You know, we find that common ground. It's exactly the same thing on social media. You have to figure out what your audience, your ideal clients, your customers care about outside of your product or service. And so when I say content mix, maybe it's humor. People love humor on social media. Maybe it's inspiration. The inspiration has been hugely successful for me. And people are like, well, Kim, what does that have to do with my product or my service? I don't understand. Why would I be sharing motivational quotes? It's not about that. It's about the connection that you form and the relationship that you build with your audience so that when they need your product or service, you come top of mind because you've been giving them great value, something that they can connect with you on. So that's why I am a huge fan of a content mix that revolves around what your audience cares about. It might be business tips if you're, you know, maybe like for us, for example, we're in a sphere where business tips they're meaningful. They have value to our audience. Maybe it's, you know, motivation. As business owners, we need motivation, right? We need that to know that we're not alone, that there's other people out there who have the same struggles and you know, whatever it is that your audience is looking for, you need to give that to them as it relates to being relatable to them so that they feel like they know who you are.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. It's almost like it's almost like we want to try to take an indirect path to the clients that we want. And for those listening at home, a good example of this is the insurance agency I used to be the marketing director for. We wanted business leaders, local business leaders. But if we did what Kim just said, we just dropped our deal in front of them, it would have never worked. So what we did is we ran a 7-article series on leadership techniques because we knew that local business leaders wanted to be seen as leaders in the community. So we taught them how to do that, and then, you know, and that started conversations that ultimately down the road, you know, 6 months, a year later, led to relationships that turned into business. So it's this indirect approach. I love that, and I like humanizing a business. Are there other ways to do that? You know, just are there like giving a human feel to the brand?
Well, you know, I see some, you know, because I've struggled so with some of the bigger corporations and having them come into what I call, and as you just referenced, the human side of marketing. because I think it's so very important right now, and I think it's going to continue to grow in importance. I think the brands that showcase care and humanity, they connect, are going to win. Those who don't are going to fall by the wayside. And I don't care if that's big brand to a mompreneur sitting at her dining room table. I think it's important that you can be relatable and showcase that human element. So it can be tough, I think, for some business owners to embrace that concept. But one of the things I've seen some businesses do is step into something that's happening in the real world, like maybe Super Bowl, for example, or their audience cares about. Now, not all of their audience is going to love football, right? But maybe a good chunk of them do, and it spawns conversations. It gets people talking. Community, in my opinion, is not about you talking to your audience. Community is about them talking to you and each other. And I think that big events, I don't want to encourage anybody to step into the political arena, but anything that is relatable to people, like sports and your own audience better than I do, but things that can open the door to a conversation, even open-ended questions are great ways to engage your audience and get them talking to you and each other.
Can we control where engagement happens today? It was 3-4 years ago, it was all about blog comments, right? You wanted to do whatever you could to get as many blog comments as you could. Today, it feels like you can't really control where those conversations happen, right? Like Copy Blogger got rid of comments and encouraged people to either, keep the conversation going on Twitter or Google+, and even that doesn't seem to have necessarily worked exactly the way you would have expected. Those conversations start popping up in different places. So can we actually control those conversations? Or is it better to let them happen naturally and try to fit in them where we feel we can?
I personally think that we should let them happen organically, and then you step into the spaces where you want to be and be active. You can't. So many people have a time and resource issue, and I get that. Who doesn't? We all have that issue. So maybe if you are, have comments on your blog, maybe, and you get engagement there, then you should definitely engage there. Lots of times people aren't in the same place as we are, or they're not as savvy that, maybe they're not on Twitter, for example, and they're not active there, but they do, they're very engaged in blog content, and they are used to being able to leave a comment on a blog, and now all of a sudden they can't leave a comment on a blog. That's very confusing for people. So I think turning off blog comments, in my opinion, is just a mistake. But that doesn't mean that some people, likewise, won't leave a blog comment, but they'll engage with your content on Twitter. So I think you meet people where they are, and then you choose to engage where you want to. I'm a big fan of the old saying that conversations are happening whether you're there or not. And you just have to choose. Are you going to be there, or are you going to let your competition be there?
Yeah, I'll tell you, conversations happening online, and not being there is what got me into social media. I was a boots on the ground insurance producer, and I stepped into a chamber of commerce circle, those circles that form, and I heard a mortgage broker say to a real estate agent, 2 centers of influence for me, let's connect on LinkedIn. And I wasn't on LinkedIn at the time, and it was like this little light bulb went off over my head. There are conversations happening that I'm not a part of if I'm not in these spaces. Now, if I had gone to them and say, hey, I'm on Facebook, why don't you guys have that conversation on Facebook so I can watch it? That wouldn't work. So I had to get on Facebook or LinkedIn in that case so that I could be part of that conversation. I'm 100% with you, and I think that is so important.
I think, too, there's another point to be made here about conversations. People take conversations more than are engaging in conversations. So a lot of people who are paying attention to what you're sharing and the conversations that you're holding on social media, and I call them lurkers. People who are, maybe not engaging with you directly, but are still attracted to your message, and they do watch how you engage and how you care for your audience. And when they need your product or service, you may have never heard from those people. You don't know who they are, but yet they feel like they know you. They feel a sense of belonging to your community, and they will ultimately buy from you. So that's why it's so very important to be there and be present and be consistent, because you're impacting way more people than just the people you're talking to.
Oh, I love that. 100% agree. That's a great point. This has been good. Let's take a question and from one of our audience members here today, and then I want to get into your book a little bit before we get out of here. So this is actually from a good friend of mine, insurance agent out of Boston, Carlos Vargas, and he asks, how do we ask for their business, their insurance business, their referral business, not money, but the actual referral? So I guess what Carlos is really asking is, how do we position a non-monetary ask versus a monetary ask? So how would we position our ask in a way that says, I don't necessarily need your money, but I would like your time or your attention on, say, sending us a referral? Is there a difference? And if there is, can you kind of drop into that a little bit?
Well, I think particularly in the insurance industry, it is tough. It's a lot tougher than some other types of businesses. But one of the things that I am particularly drawn to as it relates to the insurance industry is the stories. So many times people don't understand the impact of lack of insurance, or the flip side to that of having insurance. So sharing, and granted, you can't. In some cases, people don't want their personal information shared, so you have to pick and choose what stories you can tell. But sharing the impact of lack of insurance or having insurance, and then saying, look what happened to this family because of the fact they did have insurance, and do you know somebody that may need this type of, or is in the same situation? We all know people who need certain things, or have a lack thereof. So sharing a story with the back end of solving a problem for someone else. In other words, don't make it about you. Don't make it about the fact that you can sell them insurance. Make it about how you can help them solve or avoid a problem that they could have if they don't have insurance.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation.
Almost like paint a picture for them that they could see themselves in, and that would be a good way to solicit that kind of thing.
Absolutely. It is a little bit tougher, and you have to process you have to plan it a little bit better, but I think that it's all about how you solve a problem for somebody, and you paint that up front versus asking them to just open their Rolodex and say, or their phone in this day and age, and give them a bunch of phone numbers. I think it's more about identifying that problem and then saying, I can help, I can fix this problem.
Yeah, very good, very good. And I appreciate you dropping that into insurance context for us as well.
Yeah, sure.
A large selection of this audience are my insurance friends and colleagues, so I do appreciate that. All right, well, you got a new book coming out. It's coming out January 13th. Tell us the name of the book and give us the footnotes on this thing. What's coming on?
Sure.
What spurred you to write this new book?
Well, the name of the book is Will the Real You Please Stand Up? Show Up, Be Authentic, and Prosper in Social Media.
Oh, I love that.
The core of the book is all about authenticity, and I really didn't want the book to be, because authenticity and being authentic on social media has kind of become kind of an overused cliche term, oh, you have to be authentic. But the reality on social media is that if you're not authentic and you're not you, I kind of leverage the book on a be you message, then you're not going to create sales. So people buy from those they know, like, and trust. So how can you build out an authentic brand that's real to people so that they will ultimately buy from you? So that's the core of the book's message. The book it outlines examples, and it has exercises in it that helps people work through the process for them and their brand and their business. to identifying what is important from their passion to how they authentically showcase that on social media.
Yeah, I give you props for tackling authenticity because it is for sure it's like one of those things that it has been so brutalized as a term by kind of the hack marketer that but it also at the same time is a keystone concept in being successful in the digital space. How did you kind of position it so that you separated yourself from that that buzzy authenticity to the and I know you have this, so I'm saying that you are the buzzy. How did you position it differently in that context?
Well, I basically just really dissected the term authenticity. What does that really mean? And then, showcased examples of, independent brands that are doing it well or not doing it well. Most of the examples that I've used in the book are more of the big brand scenario, because that's where the majority of the examples that we can see and relate to are housed. They're, brands like Ford and Starbucks and, some of the bigger brands have, been able to kind of showcase the human side of through whether it's through literally a campaign that's been targeted towards something very specific, or the flip side of that is some brands who have just made some huge errors in judgment as it related to the same concept of showcasing that authenticity and being real and connecting with their audience, because I think that's the key. Sometimes things happen that you think you get what your community is all about, and the reality is you don't understand them at all. And like for example, Chrysler. I still think of Chrysler as my mom's and dad's generation type of brand. They kind of have that older demographic. And they have tried to come into the millennial age, but they haven't crossed over. They don't really understand that demographic. And I think that's the thing is, lots of times as a business, we don't take the time to understand our audience. We don't understand our ideal client. We think we know what they want, and then we put it out, and we're confused as to why they didn't buy it. So what is that realness for you? And, how do you translate that in a way that's authentic? And more specifically, how do you connect with the people who are going to ultimately buy from you? And those things sometimes can be totally disconnected.
Yeah, that is such a tough concept. It's almost like you have to we a lot of times when you look at the brands that are struggling or just businesses that are struggling to capture marketing, it's so often that I'm taking my personal biases and I'm placing them into the marketing, and it's almost like, I don't want to say it's ego. I mean, I think in some cases it's ego, but in some cases it's just we don't know any better, but we're putting our personal biases into our marketing as if everyone who buys our product looks, feels, and thinks exactly like us, right?
I think so. And, I think the bigger picture, honestly, Ryan, is that so many business owners are still stuck in traditional marketing mindset. They have not really embraced the way social works. And social is about, much of it's about word of mouth, and then connecting within those communities around things that they care about. And I think that's a huge disconnect in the minds of many business owners that I hate to say older, because it's not always an older generation issue, but they are used to traditional marketing methods, and they've tried to translate that into a social sphere, and it doesn't work. And they're like, why isn't it working? So I just think that social is a different animal, and you have to learn how to be you and be relatable and care about things that they care about outside of your product or service, in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. The last thought I want to add, because we're getting towards the end here, and this has been value packed. I almost don't want to keep going because I'm worried we'll lose our density of value ratio. But I was actually listening on my way to the office today. I was listening to Mark Schaefer and Mitch Joel on Mitch Joel's Six Physical Separation podcast, which is a great podcast for anyone who's listening to this. He's like a much smarter, more educated version of this show.
I wouldn't say that, but it is a great podcast.
Yeah. So one of the things that they were discussing was kind of in the same vein of what you just talked about, and we don't have to go very deep on this. I just would like your thoughts because I thought it was very interesting. Was Mark Schaefer brought up the point that the reason so many businesses struggle to make the transition from traditional marketing to digital is not necessarily always the business's fault, but rather the platforms themselves, being that traditional advertisers and traditional marketing agencies, when they go to digital, because digital can be measured down to the click, they almost don't want to sell digital because there has always been this, hey, we have this radio ad and it hits all these people and you have to believe us that you're getting traction. And now it's almost like the proof is in the pudding with digital, and that is a scary concept. Do you think there's any truth there, or what are your just general concepts? I mean, I just thought it was a really interesting thought, and while I have you, I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
I totally agree. I've seen a lot of traditional marketing companies that have a budget with a larger company are unwilling to step into the digital space because they don't control it, they don't understand it. They are even marketing a book is similarly, from the standpoint of an old style approach. They don't have the experience, and they know that it can ultimately, they can, like you say, you can measure it all the way down to the clicks, versus showing the demographics of a radio station, very broad, very oblique. You can't really measure it,
That's a nice word.
so it's whether it's radio or whether it's billboards or all the stuff that it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
That's not where people are. I mean, people are listening to podcasts in droves. If I was if I was stuck in that model of I'm gonna continue down this road, come heck or high water, then I would invest in podcast advertising before I would invest in radio advertising. But that's just my 2 cents.
And Kim
yes,
just
I
made
do
a great
believe.
plug for the fact that Content Warfare is always looking for fresh advertisers for 2015. You can contact.
There you go.
Well, Kim, this has been a fantastic discussion. I appreciate your time.
Sure.
And though I was joking before, this has been value packed, and I knew it would be. I want to know where people can find more information about your book.
Sure. You can actually find it on my website at kimgarst.com. Obviously, the book is on Amazon, all the bookstores, like Barnes & Noble, etc. So, but if you really quickly want to find it, you can go to kimgarst.com, and it's right at the very top of my website.
Good. And if you are looking for a really long way of getting there, you can go to ryanhanley.com/show109. This is our 109th episode, and I'll make sure that we have it linked up in the show notes. Kim, thank you so much. I wish you all the best luck with your book, and I'll make sure that Content Warfare Nation knows about its actual release on the 13th, though. I'm sure that they can pre-order now. And everybody, if you're listening at home, connect with Kim. She has so many followers on Twitter and Facebook. I'm sure you're already connected with her. But if you're not, make sure you do, because tons of great value. One of my resources that I get my news from, and just an absolute pleasure to chat with. Kim, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate being here.
All right, we're out of here, guys.